Hey guys, Miss Warren here. Today I wanted to talk to y'all about clay and what it is and where it comes from. I'm going to be talking about where it comes from geologically, like studies of the earth, where it comes from chemically, what it is physically, and why it acts the way it does. And I'm going to show you some examples of what ceramics, or like what we make out of clay, looks like when it's done. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with y'all. This is a handout made by John Norris, an art teacher, and I've been using it for a couple years because I think it really nicely summarizes what clay is and where it comes from. Clay, the simple way to put it, it's from the earth, and when you heat it at super high temperatures, it hardens. Now, geologically, geo means the earth, and logically is like study, like the study of the earth. Clay comes from decomposed rock, specifically decomposed igneous rock. So igneous rock is like volcanic rock. Now it's eroded through weathering. So it rains and it snows and it breaks down the rock into tiny, tiny little pieces, and then it's washed onto the shores of lakes and rivers. There it's mined from the ground. People dig it up, they take out all the like big sticks and leaves and stuff, and they compress it for clay. Sometimes they'll add minerals to it to change the color or texture. Sometimes they'll put stuff in and take stuff out. So for example, like a red clay, iron oxide has been added to a red clay, whereas a gray clay, like what we work with in class like this, it's mostly just kaolin, like alumina, silica, and water is mostly what it's made out of. Now, chemically, I just mentioned this now, clay is a combination of alumina, silica, and hygroscopic water. Do you see that 2 in front of the H2O? That means the water in your clay is very tiny. It's really small. It's like hygroscopic. It comes between the little molecules. Sometimes you'll add, like I said earlier, other minerals to it. Now, physically, if you were to look at clay under a microscope, zoom in really, really close, it would look like a bunch of tiny flat sheets of crystal. Now, these sheets are held together by water or moisture. So each little tiny, tiny sheet of crystal is stuck to the other with moisture. You ever accidentally pour water on playing cards or Pokemon cards? They all stick together, or like pages of a book even. If you get it wet, all the little flat surfaces stick together with suction because of the water. That's why you can squish and mold and change the shape of the clay, because the little beads of water allow the crystal structures to stick together, but to also slide across each other. That's why when it dries, not only does it not stick together as well, you also can't slide it across each other. It's stopped sliding. So a dry piece of clay, if you look here, I just rubbed it a little bit and I have dust all over my hand. Those are the little crystals. They're not sticking together anymore because it's not wet. Okay. Now, if you want your clay to, this piece of clay dried out from last year, it's kind of permanent now. Oh, well, it's not super permanent, but if I were to re-soak this, it would turn back to plastic. This bone dry clay, if I were to re-soak it, it would turn back to plastic, reabsorb the water, just like you could re-wet playing cards. Now, if you want your clay to be really permanent and not just turn back into mush when you get it wet, you'd have to add a lot of heat. Now, what's happening when you add a lot of heat is the water disappears first. So the water evaporates, it turns into steam, and it leaves the clay. The next thing, if you increase the heat, is that those little sheets of alumina and silica will start, the little crystals will start to melt together like permanently, to where they can't come apart from one another. And that's what makes the clay permanent, like with this mug. So if I poured water into this mug, it would still stay mug shaped because it's been fired at least 600, if not 800 degrees Celsius. Now, I fire the clay that we have in class, I fire that in Fahrenheit, it's about 1800 degrees. That's when the clay little fragments start melting together. Now, here, I'm going to stop sharing real quick. Vitreous or glass-like, the reason it becomes that way, so we talked about how clay is made of alumina, silica, and hygroscopic water. Do y'all know what silica is? Where we can find it other than in clay? Silica is the main ingredient in sand. What happens when you superheat sand? Turns into glass. So that's why you get a more glassy feel. So if I knock on this, here I have a spoon that I was mixing up the dry clay with. If I knock on this just bone dry clay, you don't really get any noise. But if I get some fired clay, like this mug, it makes more noise there. It's become glassy or vitrified. And now there's also I'm going to show you all some finished examples of clay pieces. A lot of times when it's finished clay, like you've made something out of it, it's called ceramics. So this is a bowl that I made in college. You can see the original color of the clay on the bottom after I fired it. The blue on the outside is a special paint called glaze. And if we get a chance to glaze this year, I'll come back and talk about what glaze is. Now, another type that doesn't need quite as much heat, so that's like a middle level clay that needs a medium amount of heat, is terracotta. So like the flower pots, I just brought this one in from outside. I don't have anything planted in there this year. This one's good. It's heated at a low heat, so it's porous. So when I water it, the water can kind of soak into the pot and I won't overwater my plants. So terracotta is good for that. And the orange color, I believe, comes from iron oxide, which is a fancy name for iron that's been oxidized, which is rust. Now, something that needs to be heated at a really high temperature is porcelain. So I have this little teacup here. It's a porcelain teacup. And if you look, I don't know if you can see it because it's starting to get a little bit dark, but it's almost translucent. You can almost see the light shining through it where it gets thinner. That's one of the advantages to porcelain, is that it has more kaolin in it. And sometimes they even add bone ash. Like after an animal is butchered, they'll take the leftover bones and they'll burn it down to ashes, and they'll add it to the clay to make it more transparent. And you can see through it, like actually you can see my finger moving. You can see the shadow through the cup. And that's porcelain. So porcelain, because it's heated the most and becomes the most glassy, has the least amount of pores in it, but it's kind of hard to work with. Things like toilets are made out of porcelain, so they're easy to clean. And things like flower pots are made out of terracotta. So there's different types of clay, different clay bodies. We work with kind of a medium body, white stoneware clay. Okay, well, that's it for today, guys. I hope you all learned a lot about clay and where it comes from and how to use it. And I look forward to seeing y'all's work, and I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.